This is the Momentum Podcast.
We're all familiar with the old adage that entrepreneurs do not love meetings. Entrepreneurs actually have conversations about how much they actively cannot stand meetings. The issue is that the traditional meeting setup feels like it takes away momentum. And the problem is that most entrepreneurs have reached the point in their careers where the momentum they are able to create on their own is not enough. In this episode of the Momentum Podcast, Alex is going to take you through the systems, the structures, and the routine and tangible advice for entrepreneurs who are maybe just a little bit afraid to meet with their teams. I hope you enjoy.
I'm Alex Sharfin, and this is the Momentum Podcast, made for empire builders, game changers, trailblazers, shot takers, record breakers, world makers, and creators of all kinds. Those among us who can't turn it off and don't know why anyone would want to. We challenge complacency, destroy apathy, and we are obsessed with creating momentum so we can roll over bureaucracy and make our greatest contribution. Sure, we pay attention to their rules, but only so that we can bend them, break them, then rewrite them around our own will. We don't accept our destiny, we define it. We don't understand defeat because you only lose if you stop, and we don't know how. While the rest of the world strives for average and clings desperately to the status quo, we are the minority, the few, who are willing to hallucinate there could be a better future. And instead of just daydreaming of what could be, we endure the vulnerability and exposure it takes to make it real. We are the evolutionary hunters, clearly the most important people in the world, because entrepreneurs are the only source of consistent, positive human evolution, and we always will be. So it's Monday afternoon, and I just got off my weekly commitments meeting with my team. We call meetings targeted interactions, but I just got off my weekly targeted interaction with my team where we create weekly commitments. And we had everyone who needed to be there, and within 43 minutes, we were able to create weekly commitments for everybody on the team where everyone has clarity as to what they're doing. We all understand what each other's doing, and we know what we're going to do this week to move forward. And the people who aren't included in that meeting, we also know what they're doing, so that in 43 minutes, we created massive productivity for our team. When we do that, it's like so exciting for me. I get off out of those meetings and I'm kind of bouncing around. I'm excited because here's the reality of business for me. So much of the reason that I am in business is because the momentum that I could create on my own, the progress I could create on my own got to a point where it just wasn't enough for me. And so the reason I have a business, the reason I have a team is because I want to get more done in a shorter period of time with bigger leverage, with a bigger impact. I want to be able to put more out there. I want to be able to make more happen. Can you relate to that? Because I think that's the reason why, as entrepreneurs, we start to build out our organizations, build out structure, build a team. And here's the issue that I hear all the time from entrepreneurs is that we hate meetings. We can't stand being in meetings. In fact, I've coached a ton of entrepreneurs who literally avoid meetings with their team. So I work with Emily Hirsch. Her story is hilarious. When I first met her, she had 3 or 4 contractors working with her, and she hadn't actually talked face to face on Zoom with 1 or 2 of them. She had done everything via email or text or messenger, and had never had a meeting with her team. When I started working with Wallace Nelson, another just incredible entrepreneur, when I first told him about how many times he should be meeting with his team, he had a physical reaction. He was like, dude, bent over. You can't make me do that. And I remember, about 6 months later, Wallace being at one of our events, and he missed our morning session. And I was like, hey, Wallace, where were you? And he said, man, I'm sorry. I had to step out. I didn't want to miss my daily huddle. It was that important to me. Like, I wanted to be there, so I didn't want to miss my daily huddle. So Wallace went from having a physical reaction to having to be with his team to walking out of an event because he was so excited about being in his daily huddle. I always promise entrepreneurs that if you do the right stuff, if you put the right process, structure, and routine in place, time with your team will give you momentum like it did for me today. But here's one of the most important parts about meetings, or targeted interactions as we call them, for entrepreneurs. Here's the key. So it's almost the most important part about about a meeting with an entrepreneur. Let me tell you. But first, just let me share with you a quote that I share with entrepreneurs all the time. What you say is heard through a megaphone, and what you do is seen through a microscope. If that makes you uncomfortable, I just want you to know it's a fact of life of being an entrepreneur. The day that you said, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a commodity, I'm gonna self-select, I'm gonna opt out of everything else, I'm gonna do something different, I'm gonna become I'm gonna create product, you became a person who is now heard through a megaphone and seen through a microscope. And if you have a team, it's even more heard through a megaphone, seen through a microscope. And what that means is everything you do is amplified, everything you say is amplified. And so here's the key to effective meetings with your team. First, process, structure, and routine that you commit to. You show up at the right time, you're there at the right time. I've got other podcasts on that. That's not what this one's about. This one's about a very specific behavior on the part of CEOs and entrepreneurs in charge and business owners in targeted interactions. And that is that you should hold space for your team. If you're willing to hold space for your team, time with your team will give you momentum. Now, if you have the process, structure, and routine that we teach, it will go much faster. You'll get into momentum much faster. But if you are willing to hold space for your team, then you will get into momentum like crazy and you will start seeing your team shift in front of you. And here's what I mean by hold space. I wrote some notes down here. So you're the most important person in the business. When I ask entrepreneurs, when I go out and speak, I say, hey, who's the most important person in your business? It's usually crickets and a few people yell like customer, the last person I talked to, my wife, my COO. Somebody might meekly say, me. That's the only right answer, is you. And so the most important tactic to getting the most out of your meetings is that you hold space for your team. You may have heard this term before, hold space for the people around you, or hold space for your team. It's a term that's used, but it's not often described or defined. So let me help you understand what it means to hold space for your team and how much it will shift your interactions with your team, and it will bring momentum from the interactions with your team, and it will improve your relationships on your team. It will make you more strategic for your team. It will change everything if you are prepared to and you allow yourself to hold space. Now, I want you to know it's a lot easier to hold space when you have a cadence and when your meetings are systematic and process driven, and when you know what to expect and you know they're going to be good and you know they're going to create momentum and you know there's going to be a celebration and you know you're winning. Those all make it way easier to hold space. But if you don't hold space, it doesn't matter if you have all those things, you and your team are going to struggle. And here's what it means. Let me define this for you. So first, you need to, just starting out, it means being present and aware. That's it. Like being present and aware. Here's what's crazy about a lot of entrepreneurs who have teams. They go into meetings with their team, and then as someone else is talking, they're answering text messages or looking at something else. Or as someone else is sharing something, they're doing something else. Or as someone else is, talking, they are like on their computer, or you can see them moving windows around. And here's what happens. If you're not present and aware for your team, then that will be an ineffective meeting. If it looks like you're not paying attention, you will have an ineffective meeting. So here's the rest of like holding space. So number one, be present, be aware, like be there with them. Stop doing anything else. Get off your phone, close all your windows, get real about the meeting. If you were talking, I hope if you were talking to a friend of yours, you wouldn't have a phone in between the two of you. And when you're in a meeting as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, use a pen. Don't take notes on a device because it looks like you're not paying attention. It breaks the ability to hold space when you're using a device. Now, that's why today, in the world of almost everyone having to work virtually or remotely and using a tool like Zoom, you have to be even more present and aware. And here's what that means. That means you need to be energetically supporting your team. Here's what that means. This may sound a little esoteric. This may even sound a little spiritual, but the world of energy is a very scientific world. I became more and more spiritual the more I studied positive thinking and energy, because there's just magic in the world. And when you are willing to energetically support your team, when you're willing to sit in a meeting and as they speak, you're willing to consider what's going on and think positively about them and see where they're excited and where they may be experiencing challenges and offer them support or send them a note afterwards and tell them thank you. If you're willing to energetically support your team, get out of everything else and just sit there, not interrogating, not making sure everybody's doing everything right, but energetically supporting your team, you will see a shift in your company and a shift in your business. And be there just to give positive energy to your team, encouragement to your team, to answer any questions anybody might have. The key is when you are in meetings, if you're not running them, it is so much easier to be present and aware and energetically support and give positive feedback to the team. So we suggest every CEO get into a passenger seat as fast as possible, have somebody else run the process, the very tactical process of running meetings. That's not strategic. Let somebody else do that. For you as the CEO, as the entrepreneur in charge, you need to be in this meeting. Getting into a passenger seat actually allows you to hold much more space than you normally could. And so when you're in a meeting, drive the outcome of the meeting. Here's what I mean by that. So today I was in my weekly commitments meeting and I took a ton of notes on paper. I paid attention to every person that was in the meeting. I gave encouraging feedback in 43 minutes. I also kind of distracted stuff at the beginning. Haley's watching this, so I know I distracted stuff a little. We probably would have been done in like 37 minutes because I made some jokes at the beginning that weren't part of the process. But anyway, today in our weekly commitments meeting, there's one outcome for me. Here's my outcome. In the less than 1 hour meeting, I want to have full confidence that every person in my company is going to turn in a crazy productive week, where at the end of the week, when I'm reviewing what happened, I'm not going to have any question in my mind that every person like crushed it, that we invested our money the right way in salaries and in people this week, that everybody's moving forward, that our team is in momentum, that we're getting the results we want. See, I set that up on Monday. I don't go looking for it on Friday. And so I have one outcome in that meeting. The reason that I've learned to hold space in that meeting, and I do not allow myself to get distracted, is because I know that if I hold space, that is the outcome. That one targeted interaction on Monday creates weekly commitments where Friday, I'm going to have a great week. So for an hour, I've learned that that is the most important thing I can do on the planet. So I have one outcome in that hour. I'm not trying to be in that meeting and answer a text message and say something on social media and do something else somewhere else. You know, I might for a second jump off and I'll actually, so let me get into the tactics of how to do this. I try and stay in the meeting as much as possible. So here's some tactics. Number one, shut everything else down, put your phone aside. Tell everybody that you're in a meeting with your team and that you're going to be focused there. Stay there and energetically support the meeting. Be present, be aware. If you're going to do something, especially on Zoom, if you're going to click into a window, I've got news for you. Everyone knows. They see your upper body moving, and they see the color and light changing. They see your eyes scanning. They know you're out of the Zoom meeting. And here's what I'm assuming is that in person, if you were sitting there with somebody, you wouldn't be jumping in and out of the meeting, in and out of your computer. So if you're in a Zoom call with somebody or even in person, shut everything else out. If you have to jump into a program, that occasionally happens to me. Somebody will ask me something in a meeting and I'll say, hey, just a sec, let me look that up. And I'll proactively tell them I'm looking it up. Or the only time I'll ever grab a device in a meeting is this one of my daughters has something going on. And if I see them text, I will say, Reagan just texted, I need a second. So everyone knows I'm not just jumping out of the meeting and they don't matter. There's a reason why I'm distracted for a moment, and I try and minimize those like crazy. When I'm talking on Zoom these days, just so that people know I'm paying attention, I'll often show my hands so that they don't have any question. There's not a device in between us and there's no other distraction, so that they know that I'm there. Because in person, it's much easier to energetically support someone. In person, it's much easier to just be there with them, to hold space. On Zoom calls virtually, it's not as easy. So I'll actually make sure people see what's going on. And like I said before, if I'm taking notes, I'll take out a pen and write notes so that it doesn't feel like I'm doing something else, interacting with somebody else. I've changed from one outcome in a meeting to having multiple outcomes by doing something else. So, you know, I think it's like part of the legend of being an entrepreneur, how much we hate meetings with our teams. In fact, it's so much that when an entrepreneur in a room says oh, I had a terrible meeting with my team, everybody else is like, oh, yeah, how horrible is it? Well, we should reverse that tide. We should deny that and say no more. time with our team should create momentum. We need to be excited every time we walk into a room with our team, and we need to be more excited every time we walk out. And I've spent my career creating that environment, that atmosphere, those processes, that structure, that routine so that that happens. And when you are willing to do that and then hold space for your team, you will be blown away at how excited you will be to get into the next meeting with your team. If you would like your meetings to be more exciting, if you would like to be able to hold space for your team, to have the process, the structure, the routine, so that your business can grow like crazy, go join our new community on Facebook. I talk about this stuff. We have a lot of other entrepreneurs that are growing their businesses. Go to Sharfen Community on Facebook. It's Sharfen Community. Grow your business. Predictably grow your business in any market, even this one. I look forward to seeing you there. And the next time you're meeting with your team, give this a try. Here's a challenge for you. Hold space. Put everything else aside. One outcome. Breathe yourself into the meeting. Pay attention to every member of your team. Consider them. Think about them. And then see if you get a better outcome at the end of the meeting. My suspicion is you're going to be blown away.